balancing factor that's in the Texas Penal Code. If the jury agrees that Karmelo Anthony was provoked, that specific word, provoked, by Austin Metcalf to use deadly force, then the jury could consider this an act of sudden passion. That would reduce the range from 2 to 20 years in prison. Now, I believe, any sentence that Karmelo Anthony gets that's 10 years or less, the jury could consider probation for him because he doesn't have a criminal record. So that's a key number right there. If the jury comes back with anything 10 years or less, then it opens the door possibly for probation for Karmelo Anthony. But I don't see anyone thinking that's going to happen just because the jury came back so quick with a murder conviction. But, of course, anything can happen. I'm told the attorneys are back in the court. We should know this decision pretty quickly.
All right, and as those who have been out there through the afternoon, you mentioned the heat, the passion on both sides. We have a live picture from CBS News Texas Chopper, and JD, weigh in as you see fit, but some pushing and shoving, which is apparently what we see here going on, and everybody with their cell phone raised and documenting everything on camera. Again, no violence per se. Andrea talked about one punch being thrown by someone earlier. Thank goodness that was it. You can understand passion on both sides, but we do not want to see anything break out into some kind of violence.
Right. Yeah, you can see this happening below us. We're only about 20 yards from a skirmish right now. But, one thing I've noticed about these people is, loud as they can be, as aggressive as they can be, they are fully aware that there are law enforcement officers, specifically Collin County Sheriff's deputies, right next to them, watching every move, and they have been very, very careful about getting in each other's faces, jawing with each other, and screaming profanities, everything you can think of, but they are not touching each other for the most part because they are very aware that they will go to jail if they are caught assaulting anyone in this public place. And so it's moving over right next to us now, this crowd of people. It's hard to even tell who they're supporting. A lot of these people are influencers. They're people who have followed this on social media, and they have strong opinions about who they support in this case. They don't make it secret, and their opinions are so strong that they're not. They claim to be journalists, but they're really just mouthpieses for one side.
Right. JD, my understanding is attorneys are back in the courtroom now, and Karmelo Anthony is back in the courtroom now. That would indicate to all of us that we're very close now to the sentence being announced.
We are very close, and our colleague Aaron Jones has just told us from the courtroom that Karmelo Anthony has entered the courtroom. He is, she says, crying and shaking as he is about to be sentenced to prison. We should know again in less than probably 5 minutes what this sentence is going to be.
And crying and shaking, if I recall from earlier when the guilty verdict was read, a reasonable description of what was going on with Karmelo Anthony in that courtroom at that time when the guilty verdict came down.
Yes, I was in the courtroom when he was found guilty, and he was really clearly tense, and his lead attorney Mike Howard had his arm around him, his head leaning against Karmelo's head. He just kept talking to him, kept rubbing his back, obviously trying to prepare him for what was to come and also console him at the same time. When this verdict was announced, when the judge read it, we saw Anthony squeeze his eyes shut. Obviously, either fighting back tears or, letting that be the source of tension from what he was hearing. And then within a few minutes, he was noticeably weeping. We could hear it in a silent courtroom. And it obviously resonated with people. Obviously a lot of those people don't have a lot of sympathy for him because he is now a convicted murderer.
Yeah, and you have to wonder if the testimony, as short as it was, from Kayla Hayes, who is Karmelo Anthony's mother. She was the only person called to the stand during the sentencing phase. And the quote from her that we took away, she said to the jury, "He is my oldest. He is my firstborn. He will always be my baby. I love him very much." And then she was asked directly, does he regret what he did? And her answer was yes. He's very sorry for what he did. And we're about to find out whether perhaps that carried any weight whatsoever with the jury.
Yeah, and you would think, that they might have considered putting Karmelo Anthony on the stand at least during sentencing after he's already found guilty and he can't really impeach himself and throw himself on the mercy of the court. Talk about how he was scared and he made a bad decision. He regrets it. We'll have to wait and hopefully get those answers from his attorneys or his family or someone at some point, because I've covered so many trials, murder trials here in Collin County, and I've never seen a sentencing phase go this quickly. There were no character witnesses. There were no psychologists who can maybe try to convince the jury that something was in a child's head that's not fully formed at 17 years old, or any number of tricks or experts or, pieces of evidence that defense attorneys use to try to help build their client's character or at least a defense. And so in this case, there was none of that. And that'll be one of the first questions we ask when we finally get a chance to question these defense attorneys.
Quick update, JD. My understanding from Aaron Jones in the court is that the judge has now entered chambers. He's back in the courtroom. And interestingly, Aaron points out that at the moment, Karmelo Anthony's parents are not in the courtroom. I don't know what to read into that, if anything. Maybe they're making their way. I don't know. But as of her last text, they are not in the courtroom.
Yeah, that's surprising because they've been on the front row right behind him throughout this entire trial. It's
well, and they certainly may be making their way in. We don't know, obviously. For those just joining us here, it is coming up on 7:30. We're live here on CBS News Texas, and we pardon the interruption for your primetime programming tonight, but a very significant case with national implications because people around this country have weighed in on this case in so many various ways. The guilty verdict today of murder for 19-year-old Karmelo Anthony, convicted now in the murder of Austin Metcalf last year at a track meet in Frisco. We're live tonight outside the Collin County Courthouse, where thankfully some voices and tempers are flaring, but nothing dramatic as far as any kind of violence, which we're glad we can say that out loud. There's a very heavy police presence. Multiple agencies are on the scene and have been, and JD and our Andre Lucia have been watching those efforts as they've done yeoman's work, trying to allow people to say what they want to say, to allow people to be passionate where passion prevails, but at the very same time not have it spill over into any kind of unnecessary violence, which so far we're happy to report has been the case. We're minutes away, it would seem, from the sentence being read. JD talked a little bit earlier. Much has been made about the makeup of the jury making the decision, not only of the guilty verdict that has already come down, but also here in the sentencing phase now, not an African-American on the jury, and that does not sit well with many people.
No, it doesn't. And, the defense is likely to use that to appeal this case. They cited legal rulings when the jury was selected and objected to the exclusion of 3 black female prospective jurors who were all educators. And they said that the prosecution was doing that for racial reasons, and they strongly objected to it, but the judge overruled the objection. We got our first look at the jury on Thursday, and that jury was not all white, has been misreported by any means. It was it's a jury of 11 women and 7 men. That's with 6 alternates, of course. And at least 2 of those women were of Southeast Asian origin, and 2 others
Yeah, hey, JD.
Okay, the jury has just rejected the sudden passion claim and they've sentenced Anthony to 35 years in prison. Wow.
JD, say it one more time, slowly.
Get that, Doug?
Say it one more time.
The jury has just sentenced Karmelo Anthony to 35 years in prison. They rejected the sudden passion defense. So he will serve 35 years in prison, which means he has to serve at least half of that before he's eligible for parole. That would be 17 and a half years. Karmelo Anthony is going to prison for 17 and a half years for the murder of Austin Metcalf.
You're watching live continuing coverage.
Some reaction here outside.
Yeah, live continuing coverage. Our J.D. Miles, Andre Lucia, and our team, Aaron Jones, Marvin Hurst, outside the Collin County Courthouse and also inside. And the sentence just read by the court, 35 years in prison is the sentence for Karmelo Anthony. And the jury rejected the opportunity to consider what was called sudden passion, an opportunity that would have given them a sentencing range anywhere from 2 to 20 years. But again, 35 years now in prison, and as J.D. Miles just reported, 17 and a half will be the mandatory minimum of that 35 before he can be considered for parole. J.D., stand by. Andrea Lucia, what are you hearing among the crowd outside as that 35-year prison sentence was just handed down?
Yeah, you know what, I'm going to step aside because people are just hearing this right now. I just saw a woman run down the street right here, letting everybody know 35 years, and we're seeing reactions of shock on people's faces. You can see people down there with their phones out. Again, that is where a lot of the reaction is playing out. There appears to be shock among people here. A lot of the supporters of Karmelo Anthony have stuck around. We're waiting to show their support as the sentencing continued. And this is, of course, not what they wanted to hear. They wanted him to be acquitted. They wanted him to get a lesser sentence. You know, even though we're certainly closer to 5 than 99 years, 35 years for a 19-year-old, more than his lifetime, more than he's been. More years than he has spent on this earth.
Puts him at 54 years of age if he were to serve the full sentence. Let's talk about the legal side of things as best we know them for the moment. In this kind of case, I do not believe an appeal is automatic per state standards and per the law, but you would think on behalf of Anthony that his lawyers will probably automatically file one, if not more, appeals.
Well, we have already heard from supporters here today that they are raising money for his appeal. So they already had that in consideration as soon as the verdict was reached. They're already thinking about the financial picture of how they're going to pull that off. And that is already underway. Absolutely.
So 35 years, the sentence that was just handed down minutes ago for Karmelo Anthony, the 19-year-old who last year killed Austin Metcalf in what the jury has said was murder. The jury had first consideration was 5 to 99 years in prison. They could go anywhere within that range. And then later during the sentencing phase, the idea in the Texas law of sudden passion came into play for consideration, 2 to 20 years. And Andrea, it's interesting because the guilty verdict came fairly rapidly. It was after 3 hours of deliberation. We had talked earlier this evening about the possibility now of those same jurors now considering the life of the 19-year-old convicted of murder, but yet at the same time, Austin Metcalf's life matters greatly in all of this, obviously. But I think the sense was it may not have come so rapidly. This was a fairly quick decision, which, you know, if you've ever been in a jury room, it can be pretty heated. It can be a lot of disagreement in a jury room. But this one certainly sounds, from the guilty verdict earlier today to this sentencing just now, a jury that was fairly sure of itself collectively as a group.
Yeah, you know, the quicker that they come to a decision, the less dissent you have to imagine that there was among them. If there had been a lot of disagreement, it probably would have meant more discussion, more deliberation. They probably would have had questions for the judge. They might have asked to review some of the evidence in the case. We didn't see any of that. We didn't see any questions coming out from the jury. We didn't see any special requests from them. We simply saw them go into deliberations, and less than 3 hours later, and part of that 3 hours would have included ordering lunch, eating lunch, selecting a foreperson. Less than 3 hours later, they have a verdict. And then again, the sentence coming out on the very same day. It has all been very quick. And, I don't want to assume what went on in there, but it certainly indicates that there wasn't a strong division among them. That's generally what you would take away from a quick decision like this. I do want to tell you, we're hearing from Erin, who is in the courtroom. She painted a picture of what was going on before the sentence was read. You mentioned that the attorneys walked in, that Anthony came in, that he was crying and shaking, that his lead attorney, Mike Howard, was comforting him and rubbing his shoulders, that Anthony's parents weren't in the room. Then we saw the judge come in, the jury came in, they handed over the verdict form, and they announced that decision, that sudden passion, they believed, was not a claim that they would accept, and that they had reached a sentence of 35 years in prison. The jury has now been released from their restrictions, according to the judge. We're told that the jury has left the courtroom. The judge also said that we will be hearing victim impact statements. Those may be from Austin Metcalf's family, talking about the impact that all of this has had on them. But he's called for a short recess first. In the meantime, Erin Jones, who's in there, tells us Anthony is visibly shaking and crying again, and once again being comforted by his attorneys who are in there with him.
Our Andrea Lucia reporting for us outside the Collin County Courthouse. Again, if you're joining us late, Karmelo Anthony, the 19-year-old, now convicted and now sentenced to 35 years in the Texas prison system for the death of Austin Metcalf, the murder, as the jury decided earlier today. Andrea, thank you. I want to send you back to primetime programming. Join us for updates throughout the night on the CBS News Texas stream. Also for a full recap of what an eventful day it has been on CBS News Texas at 10 o'clock. For now, we'll send you back to NCIS. Welcome back to live coverage here on TXA 21 tonight, and also streaming on CBSNewsTexas.com. You're looking at live pictures overhead outside the Collin County Courthouse, where you can read the banner at the bottom of your screen. It's pretty simple and straightforward. Karmelo Anthony, the 19-year-old, has been sentenced to 35 years in prison. Sudden passion claim rejected. Let's talk a second about what that means if you're not up to speed on that, because it came into play very late today. Andrea Lucia, J.D. Miles, Erin Jones, Marvin Hurst, all at the courthouse tonight. And Andrea, if we could jump in on conversation with you as we watch a crowd of people here, maybe talking, exchanging words we don't know. I know you're kind of far away from them, but explain to people what that sudden passion claim is and when we learned about it, because it wasn't until late, right?
Yeah, this is an element that really comes up in sentencing, not in the guilt-innocence phase of the trial. So sudden passion is a legal element that can be brought up during sentencing. It refers to the circumstances of the murder and whether Karmelo Anthony, who is now convicted, committed that murder in an act of sudden passion. And perhaps provoked by something that the victim did. What it does, in effect, is it takes that first-degree murder charge and it turns it into a second-degree murder charge. It shifts the range of possible sentencing from 5 to 99 years to 2 to 20 years. So once that was introduced, we had a different range that we were looking at. But the jury did find that they rejected that claim. They didn't believe that it played a part in the murder of Austin Metcalf, and so that left us in the 5 to 99 range, and they ended up with 35 years as their decision.
Can I ask you this? I just got word from Erin inside the courtroom. No visible reaction from the Metcalf family when the victim's family, obviously, after the 35-year sentence was read. I have not been in the courtroom. What have you noticed from their family over the course of the trial when you've been inside? Is this somewhat, how they've been, fairly stoic and non-reactive, or is this different?
Well, and I'd probably defer to JD. He has been the one who has been representing us inside the courtroom. But, you know, there have been cautions to those there not to have big reactions. And it's hard to know how a family should react. There's certainly nothing joyful about what's going on here today. The Metcalf family is not going to get their son back. And now we have Karmelo Anthony, who's going to prison for 35 years. So you have two families very much affected. Certainly not a joyful outcome for anybody involved. But I think JD can speak more to what the Metcalf family has been showing, how they have appeared in court throughout this period.
Just waiting on some updates via text here. We've got our Aaron Jones inside the courtroom who is feeding us information. If you're not up to speed on that, because typically, a lot of cases, we can go inside the courtroom. We've got cameras. We can hear audio. None of that was allowed or permissible during this trial. And, in fact, rules have changed in Collin County, and J.D. Miles eloquently went over that earlier. But the bottom line is this is somewhat of a federal trial for us when we look at it from a coverage standpoint. We have one reporter inside the courtroom who is feeding us all the details, because that is the way the judge and the county has decided trials are going to work for now. And Aaron Jones is inside, Andrea Lucia, J.D. Miles, I mentioned, outside. It would appear, Andrea, that even the words of the defendant's mother didn't weigh too heavily when they come back with a 35-year sentence. She was the only one, and she was Kayla Hayes, talking about the love of her son, which, you know, obviously any mother would need to say that, despite the horrible circumstances of what we're dealing with. But the question at the end from the defense attorney was, does he regret what he did? Perhaps an effort, obviously, to, you know, receive some kind of mercy from the jury. And her answer was yes, he's very sorry for what he did. You know, did that come into play? Would the jury have maybe leaned toward the upper end of that 99-year spectrum, and they gave him a break at the 35? I think until, obviously, we talk to members of the jury, we're not going to know that answer.
Yeah, a lot of the times attorneys will, after the trial concludes, after the jurors are released, a lot of the times attorneys will be able to go back and ask questions of the jury. That is likely a question that will come up. What worked, what didn't? Whether they share that with us is up to them. We do know that there is a press conference planned after the victim impact statement, so it's certainly one thing we'll be asking the attorneys, if they were able to speak to the jurors, if the jurors indicated what factors they took into consideration when coming up with their decisions to convict and to sentence Anthony to 35 years behind bars. So we'll be looking forward to learning more. But then again, the jury isn't compelled to share any information. They're not compelled to talk to anyone. They're certainly not compelled to talk to us. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they want to provide clarity. But it will be up to them. There's a lot of protection around those jurors, around their identities, and around the process that takes place in the jury room.
My understanding is J.D. Miles is back with us. Andrea, stand by. Thank you very much. J.D., any new info to share from your side of things?
Well, I heard you guys talking about the Metcalf family, and I was in the courtroom for all 5 days of this case. And I can tell you that the Metcalf family was told by the prosecution before the verdict came in. I was in the courtroom for that. They urged them, please don't show any kind of emotion whatsoever, and they were stoic. And that's probably what they were urged to do in this case. They know that any emotion may only provoke the other side, and so they definitely will have their chance to release those emotions with a victim impact statement. I saw Jeff Metcalf for the first time today carrying a spiral notebook. Knowing Jeff Metcalf, talking to him many times, I've got a feeling he's got a very lengthy victim impact statement that he is eager to read to Karmelo Anthony. He was in the courtroom for every day of this. Of course, Austin Metcalf's mother was in the courtroom. Interestingly, today in the courtroom for the verdict and the sentencing, Austin's twin brother, Hunter Metcalf, who was on the witness list. He didn't testify, but he's been out of the courtroom every day of this trial. Today, was the first time he was in the same room with Karmelo Anthony since April 2nd, 2025, that day under the tent when the stabbing happened. You can only imagine the feelings that were going through him when this happened. I was told that the prosecution didn't feel like they needed to bring Hunter on the stand. They felt like they had a strong case without him, and they didn't want to re-traumatize him and have him go over what happened that day, that he's obviously, from what I'm told by the family, still very much struggling with what happened, and you know, hopefully getting help to deal with it. So that's what I know about the Metcalf family. I'm hoping we'll get a chance to talk to them when they come out of this. I don't know about the Karmelo Anthony family. They have been pretty much shut-ins. They don't let a lot of people know about what they're thinking or feeling. They had one news conference back about 3 weeks after this happened, and you know, it was very short, just a couple of statements, and that's it. And so they haven't spoken since. I'm not sure if they're going to say anything at this point. They're obviously going to be distraught over this lengthy sentence, but we'll have to wait and see. Otherwise, the news is kind of filtering through the crowd here, and you know, while initially there were some screams and shouts, seems to be nothing more than somebody on a loudspeaker, you know, who's a street preacher who's out there, you know, spreading that message. So he's not exactly inciting anything. You can see people standing over here. I think they're just waiting to find out if they're going to be any of the players are going to come out and speak. But otherwise, we're not seeing any clashes. We're not seeing any chants. We're not seeing any kind of organized demonstration of that kind that would make you concerned about security.
Gotcha. JD, you and I both covered many of these. You're fairly well versed, obviously, on what happens next. 19 years old, Karmelo Anthony is now sentenced to 35 years in prison. He's in Collin County tonight, but the way the state prison system works, it's a high likelihood that he will be in a state prison cell fairly quickly, right?
You would think so, and it makes you and me probably think about Tanner Horner when he was convicted of murdering Athena Strand about 2 months ago. I mean, he was on death row the very next day, and so it's obviously probably a lot more paperwork, a lot more hoops to go through to get somebody on death row than to send them to a prison here. I'm sure that right now Collin County is already working with one of the state prison units to transport Karmelo Anthony. It's unclear because of his age, his lack of criminal background, if he'll go to any kind of certain security risk prison that's either medium or you know, more serious than others, but we'll find that out soon. We'll probably get from TDCJ a mugshot of Karmelo Anthony so you can see what he looks like now, and you know, we'll get more information about where he is and things like that.
JD, let's you and I stand by and take a listen for a second. My understanding is we do have some reaction from outside the courthouse, and let's all listen to this together. This is what some people had to say after the sentence of 35 years was read for Karmelo Anthony.
Definitely two losses. The young man Austin that lost his life, and then this young man, you know, he's going to lose at least 17 years of his life. So it's pretty sad all the way around.
Well, I got kids. I got black kids. 35 for defending myself. It's not right. And we all know why it's not right. It's just not right. I'm hurt. I'm hurt.
Completely sickening. I wish both families to come here right now. I have no words. No words.
There we go. Mic back on. Thanks. So, JD, bring you back into the discussion. I don't know if it was hard to hear, but a mix on both sides, obviously. People still very passionate about whether they, you know, support Austin Metcalf or Karmelo Anthony.
Excuse me for a second, Doug. We have somebody here who's expressing their opinions to us, and it's keeping us from really hearing what you're saying, but we'll...
Yeah.
All right, we're back. Sorry about that.
Oh, that's okay, JD.
Go ahead, Doug.
A lot of people talking to you out there, I know. I was just saying the reaction that we just played on the air, it was probably hard for you to hear out there. But basically kind of what we've seen all along, people who are beside themselves now in a 35-year sentence, and some people simply saying that justice has been done.
Yeah, Well, I mean, this woman who came up to us, I mean, she wasn't intending to disrupt us. It wasn't anything intentional, but she was expressing something that a lot of these people are, and that's why they get frustrated with us, because she's coming up to us saying, do you think this was fair? It's not for us to say in the media or as true journalists to say what's fair or not. We're here to report what happens and try to pass along information to people. So I couldn't give her an answer, and she got frustrated with me. So, you know, there's a lot of people who want comfort from others who feel the same way, and they can share these feelings with. And, you know, unfortunately, there's people out here who have the exact opposite opinion as them, and that's what can kind of create a toxic environment. And,
sure.
You know, we see people jawing at each other and then going at it. But,
JD, let me,
for the most part, you know, outside of this lady.
Yeah, let me share with you a little bit. We're getting some updates on victim impact statements. Austin Metcalf's aunt, Marley, said in court that the day Austin died is, quote, a day I'll never forget. Quote, I never truly believed that Austin could be gone, end quote. Had the heartbreaking moment of having to tell Austin's grandmother the news, called that impact permanent. She went on to say that, quote, there's a void in our family that can never be filled, end quote. Talked about leaning on God, but it still doesn't lessen the pain. And she went on to say that, quote, we must trust in God's plan even when we don't understand it. And then she talked about Austin having babysat her girls, saying that she loved watching him compete and excel as an athlete. And the final quote was, we will never know what his future would have been. Again, that is a victim impact statement that we just got from the courtroom on Austin Metcalf's behalf from his aunt Marley, who you may or may not have met along the way, JD.
I did meet some of his aunts. Jeff Metcalf introduced me to them on the day after the murder when I went to go interview him. I met even a grandmother, and, you know, they were all just torn, broken. I mean, they obviously love these boys. There were pictures of them together all over the house, hunting and their sports achievements, and so it's shattered this family. You know, I want to point out that Jeff Metcalf, he's been a very, you know, I guess, target on social media. People feel like he's too abrasive or he's too combative, and he gets into it with some of these people that are on the Karmelo Anthony side. He's told me that he forgives Karmelo Anthony for what happened. He just wants justice. And so I would think that if he is going to speak and give a victim impact statement, that he'll express that. You know, he can really get upset when you talk to him about what happened, and you can feel like he's about to lose control of his emotions, and then all of a sudden he comes back down to earth, and he's very reasonable about it, and he speaks in a very poignant way about his son and about how, you know, life can throw you curves like this. And but, you know, he says he'll never be the same. I don't want to get too much into the family drama, but you know, Hunter and, you know, all members of this family are not nearly recovered from what happened. They are still totally shattered. And
yeah, I've got a quote from Hunter.
This is going to help at all, but
if I may, real quick, just passed on by Andrea Lucia, very emotional, she described it, and the quote is, Hunter must live every day without his brother. So this is in regards to Hunter, obviously. One question will always remain, why? And I think anybody in any case like this will spend a lifetime wondering the why behind all of this, right? And that may apply to both sides.
It obviously will, and, you know, that shock, that reality, that trauma is what Drew Anthony and Kayla are feeling right now as the parents of Karmelo Anthony. They must be unbelievably torn up by this.
Yeah. And, JD, allow me to interrupt real fast. Yeah. We're gonna end the broadcast on TXA 21, but we're gonna continue live on the CBS News Texas stream. So JD Miles is standing by. Andrea Lucia, our Aaron Jones, is in the courtroom. So for the moment, I'm going to say thank you so much for watching here on TXA 21 tonight. Karmelo Anthony sentenced to 35 years in prison. Our coverage continues live on the stream at CBSNewsTexas.com. All right, live on the CBS News Texas stream as we continue our coverage now, entering the 8 o'clock hour here in just a few minutes. J.D. Miles on the scene right outside the Collin County Courthouse. Andrea Lucia, Aaron Jones there tonight, our Marvin Hurst as well. We've heard from so many, but continuing the conversation, J.D., with you, I'm getting a few more quotes, and you've interacted with the families here. From Megan Metcalf, the mother, the quote is, "From the moment my boys were born, they were my world. Now my house is quiet and tears fall." Can you imagine the quote from the mother who lost her son a year ago, obviously, Austin Metcalf, but now through the enormous emotional trial that ends with a 35-year sentence for Karmelo Anthony. Andrea Lucia, what are you hearing from where you are?
I have been following along with the updates that we're getting from Aaron Jones inside the courtroom. She has been sharing quotes. You've read some of them from the victim impact statements that are going on right now in the courtroom. We have heard from Austin Metcalf's aunt. We've heard now and are hearing now from his mother. They're expressing the impact that this has had on them and just this devastating loss that they have experienced. I can share more from Austin Metcalf's mother, who said, "My son was murdered. He didn't just die." And she says that the hardest part is living with this loss every day. She talked about living in a quiet house. She talked about how it used to be filled with Austin's laughter, and now it's filled with tears. She said Austin always had a way of bringing people together. He was a peacemaker. I miss talking to him. Now my conversations with him are one-sided. Sitting at his grave, I have to accept that instead of walking beside me, he's walking above me. She is directing her comments to the court where Karmelo Anthony is sitting, having just been sentenced to 35 years. I'm not sure who else we will hear from, but, you know, I can only imagine what it's like to be in that courtroom right now listening to this.
Yeah, so I appreciate the clarity on that because, you know, part of me had wondered, is this hallroom conversation in the courtroom? But they're still underway in the court. These are victim impact statements, correct?
Correct. Yes. At this point, you know, the conviction has happened. The sentence has happened. Everything official, you might say, has happened. Victim impact statements really come at the very end of everything, and it is an opportunity for those who have been affected, whether in some cases it may be the victim themselves, in cases like this where the victim is no longer, it's hit their family, and they get a chance to look into the eyes of the person who has been convicted, or to thank the jury in some cases, to thank the judge, to thank the prosecutor, and really let everybody there know how this has affected them, what it feels like. This is stuff that's not going to, you know, wouldn't have been allowed perhaps into consideration of guilt or innocence, might not have been allowed for, you know, consideration in setting of the sentence, but it's just something that people want to be allowed to say, that the people most closely affected want to say. Perhaps give them some closure, perhaps give them a chance to speak directly to the person convicted of this crime. It gives them an opportunity to say whatever it is that they have to say before everybody goes home for the day.
Watching live continuing coverage here on the CBS News Texas stream, and it has been a interesting day to say the least, with a quick conviction to a certain degree. Less than 3 hours, jury deliberated this afternoon. They told us that they had a verdict, I think it was in the 2 o'clock hour, and then they went into the sentencing phase this evening, or late afternoon at the very latest. And it wasn't too much longer later that the jury has come back as what you see on the screen, 35 years in prison, and the sudden passion claim rejected. And we've explained it a couple of times, but for anybody who's just joining us, Andrea, once again, if you wouldn't mind, the sudden passion claim was something that entered the chat in the sentencing phase, per the Texas law, that comes into play after the initial guilty verdict. The consideration first was 5 to 99 years for this jury, but then sudden passion was a consideration for them, which they clearly rejected. But explain that to viewers on the stream right now, what that exactly means and what they could have considered.
Right. Right. Sudden passage is a legal element that gets introduced in the sentencing phase specifically that essentially takes that first-degree felony and turns it into a second-degree felony, which reduces the sentencing range that you're looking at. Again, he could have been sentenced to something within 2 to 20 years instead of 5 to 99 years. It got rejected. I'll read from the law since I am not an attorney, but according to the Texas Penal Code, at the punishment stage of a trial, the defendant may raise the issue as to whether he caused the death under the immediate influence of sudden passion arising from an adequate cause. And the Texas Penal Code defines sudden passion as passion directly caused by and arising out of provocation by the individual killed or another acting with the person killed. So in other words, Austin Metcalf, the jury would have found that Austin Metcalf, the victim, did something to provoke Karmelo Anthony. Obviously, they found that not to be the case, but if they had, it would have reduced the sentence. Since they didn't, we were within that 5 to 99-year punishment range, and that's where we ended up with 35 years.
And you would think, obviously, a high likelihood of an appeal in the defendant's case here. You talked earlier about money already being raised, in fact, to try and fund such an effort. What do you know about that?
Right. As soon as we had that verdict, even before we got into the sentencing, as soon as the verdict came out and we knew that Karmelo Anthony had been found guilty of murder, we heard from Dominique Alexander, who is a well-known local activist in the North Texas area. He is with the Next Gen Action Network. He has been serving in some ways as a bit of a spokesperson for the Anthony family. He came out and talked about the fact that they are already raising money for the appeal. So the financial considerations for that appeal are already being made. Money is being collected. We don't know how much, but the supporters of Karmelo Anthony are already looking for ways to fund that appeal to make sure that it happens. And, you know, some of the issues that we have talked about, the sudden passion, the disagreement over the jurors, there not being a single black individual on this jury. These are all elements that could come up again when this goes to an appeal. We're just going to have to see what kind of argument is made there.
As to the future, the immediate future for Karmelo Anthony, he's in the Collin County courtroom this evening. J.D. Miles reflected on a completely different case, but Tanner Horner went from the courtroom to a death row cell in less than 24 hours, if I recall correctly. So Texas Department of Criminal Justice will soon, and likely very soon, be in charge of Karmelo Anthony's fate, where he's going to serve his time, at least initially. This transfer over to the state and to the prison system usually happens fairly quickly, does it not?
It can, absolutely. We know that Karmelo Anthony was remanded into custody as soon as we got the verdict. Now, he would have remained within the county until the sentencing was over.
Yeah, obviously, Andrea, stand by a second. We cannot hear your microphone for the moment. So, guys, you can just let me know when we get that figured out. Live TV sometimes. Welcome in. CBS News Texas live on the stream tonight. We've been on for, gosh, probably 45, 50 minutes now, if not a touch longer. The Metcalf family, to our understanding, as you see there on the bottom half of your screen, giving impact statements right now from Karmelo Anthony. Andrea, I can hear you again, and you were kind of cut off right at the very beginning of what you were saying, so please start again. Go ahead.
Oh, no, absolutely. We were talking about just how quickly the transfer to the state prison system can take. And I know as soon as the verdicts came down, Karmelo Anthony was remanded into the custody of the Collin County Sheriff's Office. So he has been out on bond. He became essentially an inmate with the guilty verdict. He would have stayed within the county jail through the end of the sentence. the sentencing portion. We've now reached the end of the sentencing portion. So at this point, he could be passed on to the state custody to begin his sentence in prison. It is late enough in the day, being 8 o'clock right now, that my guess would be that he would stay in the county jail tonight. But as early as tomorrow, we could see him being moved.
And in so many different kinds of cases, when we look across the country here and there, and certainly not relating this to any of the others, but there are moments sometimes when people involved, say in this case the parents of Karmelo Anthony, can ask the court or plead with the court, and then obviously into the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, could you perhaps put him somewhere close so it's not a 10-hour drive or an 8-hour drive? I'm just curious what knowledge, if any, we have on how that may play out, because I think typically the system decides where you're going, and that's kind of it.
Yeah, that would be something to take up with the state, right? He will now go into the custody of the state, which is another entity, and it may be something that they choose to plead with at that point. We are hearing from Aaron Jones. He was in the courtroom right now, and actually Austin Metcalf's father has been delivering his victim impact statement. I can read you some of that. He said, "From the first day he grabbed my finger, he had my heart with it." That is Jeff Metcalf speaking about his son, Austin Metcalf, who was murdered. He talked about, he said, watching him grow up through the years went way too fast. He loved watching him play sports. He said, "I truly believe you had a great career ahead of you. Your intensity on the field showed the leader you were. Your teammates looked up to you. Your brother did you proud. Your mom was all in." They're showing off photos of him on the big screen in the courtroom. He said, "We've started a scholarship in the memory of Austin so people know what it's like to be a leader." He said he was so happy that Austin was dedicated to his faith. He said, "The saddest part is we don't get to see you achieve all your goals." Quote, "We were robbed." He's telling Karmelo Anthony, who was convicted of his son's murder, not to look down. He's also saying, he also says here, "The public's response sickens me. When people want to tear down my son's memory and I have to be quiet." He said, "The moral decay is frightening." He also says, "This was never about race. Please don't make it about race. It is about right and wrong." And he tells Karmelo Anthony, "Your consequences is accountability. You will face those consequences starting today." He talks about his sons, Austin Metcalf and Austin's twin brother Hunter. They weren't bullies, they weren't racist. They understood respect, but still people continued to harass our family. He talks about how many times that they have been swatted when people have called police to their home. And he says, "Austin's death destroyed the person I used to be." He says, "No father should ever hear he does not exist anymore. My son's death didn't just break my heart, it broke my nervous system." He said he doesn't sleep the same. He says, "People will think grief is sadness. It's not. It is rage, pure, unfiltered rage." And he was pounding the podium as he said that. He said this has made him realize how cruel people can be. Addressing Karmelo, he says, "You failed your parents, you failed yourself, and you failed society. You don't belong in this community." It is sort of gut-wrenching to even read this.
Yeah.
I can't imagine what it's like to be in there. We're being told Hunter Metcalf, Austin's twin brother, will be coming up next to address
it feels like
Karmelo Anthony and those in the courtroom.
It feels like a little bit of the context, at least for people who may not be, invested in the story per se over the last year. Jeff Metcalf, the dad on the stand, it sounds to me like he's obviously referring to all the vitriol that has been online. Obviously, there has been an enormous amount of misinformation and disinformation and finger pointing and yelling and worse over the course of time leading up to this trial. This has been one of the most talked about and vitriolic moments that we were all expecting coming up to the trial, especially when we talk about online lately, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And people have connected this to much larger issues. I mean, you heard him say that this isn't about race. People have really spoken about it in the context of race relations. We have seen people out here with all kinds of signs, whether it is, White Lives Matter, or whether it is comments about, Karmelo Anthony needing leniency, and, saying that this was an act of self-defense on his part. People are connecting this to bigger issues. They are making wide-ranging assumptions about what happened in this case based on what's happening in the country. And for the people that were in the courtroom, for the prosecution specifically, they repeatedly tried to keep boiling this down to, what happened between two teams. What happened that day between Karmelo Anthony and Austin Metcalf, and that is what this trial came down to, and not to drag it into anything else that is going on across the country.
Andrea, stand by one moment.
The jury listened to that message.
Yeah, go ahead, finish your thought. I apologize.
No, I was just saying, it certainly sounded like the jury listened to that message.
Yeah. I'm going to ask you to stand by just because J.D. Miles is back up with us. And J.D., you've had a number of occasions to be with the Metcalf family, to hear from them. I don't know how much you heard that Andrea just shared regarding the father, Jeff Metcalf's statements in the court now during the victim impact statements, but very impassioned, pounding on the desk at one point to make a point. Does this sound like the father that you have spoken to?
Absolutely. He's, like I said, a very gruff person, and that's not an insult. He would probably agree with me on that. He's very straightforward. He can be a little bit strong in his language, and he's blunt, and I'm sure he's been looking for this moment, looking forward to this moment for a long time. Like I said, he's told me to my face that he has forgiven Karmelo Anthony for what he did, but he wants justice, and he also feels still some hostility toward Karmelo Anthony for what he did to his son. This was a gruesome crime that any parent would just be completely devastated over. I was, though, talking to one of our photographers out here who had been interviewing some of the people who are on the Karmelo Anthony side. They made it clear to him that they feel like 35 years is way too long as a punishment for this crime. They say that considering his age, he was only 17 years old when the stabbing happened. Also, the fact that he has no previous criminal record, and the fact that it was something that wasn't at least premeditated more than a few minutes before it actually happened. There was a little bit of some sort of, maybe not sudden passion as the jury rejected, but there was obviously something that antagonized him that caused him to be agitated and to act this way. They feel like that's too harsh of a punishment, and I'm also seeing that a lot on social media from people who are upset about this and will likely not let this go after today. I mean, they're going to keep complaining about the justice system. We heard a local civil rights leader commenting about the trial and saying that this trial shows that Collin County doesn't care about black people, that black lives don't matter in Collin County. So it's something that has put Collin County on notice among the Karmelo Anthony supporters, and we'll see if they take this and move on, or if they decide they're upset enough about it to demonstrate out here or protest or actively engage with the county commission to change the justice system here. We'll see. We hear some chanting going on in the background. We see some running.
JD, let me jump in.
Break it out.
Let me jump in real quick. I can tell you, we just got a message. Court has adjourned. So want you definitely to be on the lookout for anybody who comes out. But at the same time, keep your earpiece in for a minute, because my understanding is we're now hearing from someone who was in the court, at least for part of the victim impact statements, to share their reaction with us. So let's roll the sound and take in what this person has to say.
We couldn't stay. Again, no disrespect to those that had victim impact statements. Again, I spent time with the Metcalf family during this entire time. Gave my condolences. I can hold compassion and empathy for a family that has lost their child, while also saying I don't fully agree that we should throw the book at the other one. And at the end of the day, We got the sentence, sitting there watching him breaking down and shaking. We couldn't stay for 20 victim impact statements because the reality is if he had stayed on the bleachers with all the friends and the kids that were fine with him being there without being told that he has to move or I'm going to force you to move, and then physically move to where he felt he needed to defend himself, both would still be living their lives, graduating and moving on right now, and that's the bottom line.
So that, to my understanding, was a court watcher, not anybody affiliated with either side in this trial, simply in the courtroom earlier today and through this night tonight for the sentencing phase. We're live here on CBS News Texas on the stream. We appreciate your time tonight watching us, Doug Dunbar and the entire team, as we are looking in on some of those, I believe, from inside the court coming out now. J.D. Miles is there, Andrea Lucia. Aaron Jones has been in the courtroom for us this evening as Karmelo Anthony was sentenced to 35 years in prison. The possibility of considering sudden passion, which would have given a shorter sentencing opportunity for the jury to consider, was rejected by the jury. That would have been a 2 to 20-year spread on prison time. Instead, the standard guideline that they went by was 5 to 99 years. And they went basically almost halfway, 35 years for the 19-year-old who will be remanded to state custody in all likelihood fairly quickly. We've seen an enormous police presence. We've seen very passionate people on both sides supporting Karmelo Anthony and also supporting the young man who was murdered, Austin Metcalf. The victim impact statements read in court over the last, I'd say, about 30 minutes or so, hearing from multiple members of Austin Metcalf's family. Jeff Metcalf, the father, J.D. Miles, reporting eloquently just a little bit ago. He spent a lot of time with him, and J.D. described him as gruff and said that Mr. Metcalf would probably agree with that description, and had a lot to say in court, which we may or may not hear from him once he steps outside the court. Right. There's quite a few people gathered into this evening, but again, things have remained calm outside, even though people are passionate on both sides and have a lot to say and let their passion show in when they're speaking through this evening. But there's been no violence, and it's worth noting, and multiple police agencies have been on scene here throughout the entire trial, and especially today. J.D. Miles, understand you've got somebody there to talk to. Go right ahead.
Yeah. Doug, I'm with Angela Lucky. She's the president of the Grand Prairie NAACP chapter. Angela, you're out here obviously because of this case. Let's first of all start off by asking you your reaction to this sentence and verdict.
Well, first of all, I want to say it's a tragic for both families. One family lost a son, will never see their son again, and then you have the other family. Their son had just been given 35 years. The sad part about it, I think the school district and the athletic department of that school district, they owe some blame as well. I just hope that they put a policy together that govern athletes, regardless what sport it is, because we know that when you go to these sports activities, a lot of the athletes do not sit with their teams, and so I'm just hoping that that school district put a policy in place to make sure that there is an adult there. There is a person that's there that will be supervising these athletes when they go on trips and so forth.
Let me ask you real quick. Why has this case galvanized a lot of civil rights groups and people in the black community?
Well, when you take a look at the jurors, no blacks on the jury. No blacks on the jury. Karmelo Anthony, he's black, he's African-American male, and there was no one that looked like him that was on that jury. And time after time, young black men and black men, period, it's like it's a double standard. It's a double standard. You hear that you have the right to protect yourself, but in this case, I have a lot of concerns and questions about, what justice looked like. It just does not feel right in this situation.
So what can you do about it if you still feel like that this was not a fair application of the justice system?
Well, I don't live over here in Collin County, because if I did, right now we'll be working on trying to get the judge out of that courtroom. I think that we need to make sure that we participate in our elections, and we need to put people in there that's fair. And then also I want to point out the fact that when you serve as a juror, you need to uphold the law. You know, put aside the unconscious biases or the biases. And in that courtroom, in the impact statement, the father was allowed to use profanity a while ago. And that's disturbing. It showed the hostility and the anger that many people have been saying that the father had.
Interesting. Well, so where are you off to? Are you going to be out here for a while, or are you going to?
I'm headed back to Grand Prairie.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Angela, for sharing your thoughts. It's good to see you again. I'm sure we'll be in touch on other news happenings in Grand Prairie, and keep us updated if you become involved in anything else with this case or any of the people in it. So
I will.
Appreciate it. Thank you. That's Angela Lucky. She's the president of the Grand Prairie chapter of the NAACP. Obviously, we didn't know. I guess I didn't know. I know we've been reciting some of the victim impact statements of Jeff Metcalf. I didn't know about the profanity. Clearly, it's getting back to people in this crowd, and they don't feel like it was appropriate, and so they have every right to feel the way they feel. And they also talked about the justice system here, and that they don't see that this was a fair trial at all. No blacks on the jury. The speed of the case, some of the objections to the defense case that came from the judge, it's not sitting well, and it obviously will resonate here, and we'll see how it goes in the long run. But we're still waiting to hear from the prosecution, the defense attorneys, and hopefully some of the families possibly coming to a podium that we've got inside shortly.
Yeah, we're on standby for all of that, JD. So we'll talk to you in just a moment, because Andrea Lucia, I know you at least saw members of the Anthony family coming out. Whether or not they spoke is still not really known, because I know you're kind of far away from where they were. But what did you see as far as the Anthony family? Who did you see, and where are they now?
You know, at this crowd, you can see some of the crowd behind me. We saw a car.
You know, I don't remember.
Crowd surrounded.
That was JD's mic. Go ahead.
The car that was coming. So I apologize. You can see the crowd here. Still people standing around here behind me. We saw a car that was pulling out. The crowd surrounded them, and I'm told that it was the Anthony family. Right next to me, I have Alexis Ramirez. He's one of our photographers who've been on the scene. He was much closer. Alexis, can you come tell us if they were speaking?
Yeah, she was only saying race.
Come on up.
Yes, the crowd started gathering around the car, and then she just kept doing the hard sign and saying racist, racist, and everybody just kept going. And then as the sheriffs tried to open the road so that way she can leave, crowd kept just gathering around the car, and then she kept saying the same thing.
Yeah.
And then it took them at least 10-15 minutes to leave the parking lot.
So yeah, I heard people saying that was the Anthony family.
Yes, that's what it was. Yes.
The parents.
I don't know who that was, but it was part of the Anthony family. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And people were. I saw the sheriffs come up too.
Yeah, the sheriffs was trying to move the people so that way the family can leave, but people were not moving, and we were, as the media, we were also trying to get video. And
it looked like the crowd was supporting them.
Yes. All the crowd was supporting him and started chanting with her, racist, racist.
Yeah. All right, well, there you have it. Alexis was far closer than I was. It was all taking place just behind me, though, and again, you can see the people who were out there. Some of them still out there now, still gathered there. They were showing their support for a car that appeared to be filled with members of the Anthony family. And we're going over some of the video that we got. But a lot of impassioned reactions out here, and people are sticking around. Even now that we have a sentence, they've been sticking around. Doug?
And JD had talked earlier, Andrea, about our expectation typically would be to hear from attorneys on both sides they certainly reserve the right to speak or not to speak if they want to or not. Do you get any sense as to whether we're going to hear from them this evening?
You know, I've been told that there is a press conference. I am waiting to see who will speak. We had made a request to hear from attorneys on both sides. We've mentioned that sort of throughout the trial that there's been this gag order in place, and they have been unable to speak to us. They have been barred from speaking to us. So we've been very limited in our direct communication with the parties involved as this has been going on. But we were given reason to believe that they would be speaking at a press conference, at least I believe the district attorney's office. So I'm waiting to see if that happens. We saw the Anthonys leave, who we believe to be the Anthonys, and now we're waiting to see who else walks out and who is going to be speaking exactly. We're all still waiting on that.
And just confirm for me, so we believe we saw the Anthony family, or some of them at least, but so far, to your knowledge, no sign of anybody from the Metcalf family coming out.
Right. We do know that they have been allowed another way to exit. So I don't expect them to walk out of the front here. I don't expect the jurors to walk out the front here. There generally are sort of protected ways for sensitive individuals like the jurors, like the judge in the case. There are protected exits for them that allow them to leave without walking out the front of the courthouse. They could always choose to do so,
right.
But I do not expect to see them in particular. Somebody who does want to speak, anybody who does want to share their opinion publicly might be walking out, but those are the only individuals. Anyone who really wants to speak publicly would be the only person that I would expect to see walking out of the front of the courthouse at this hour.
And that all certainly makes sense. You know, it's so often with all of us covering this and people who watch this, your first reaction is, I want to hear from the players who were in there. But at the very same time, none of us can put ourselves in the shoes of anybody who was in that courtroom over the course of the last 7 to 9 days when you sum it all up, and the exhaustion, I would think, that some of them may feel, both physically and emotionally at this point after everything that they've gone through.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, we had those victim impact statements that the people that were closest to this did get to say their piece. They got to say it to Karmelo Anthony. They got to address him specifically. They got to address the people who were in the courtroom throughout the trial. They had their opportunity to speak, and that was in the courtroom. We've had some quotes. We did have Erin Jones there. She has been sharing with us some of the details, some of the specific things that were said. But that is perhaps all I expect to hear from the Metcalf family today. If we hear from anyone else, I expect it would be the attorneys at this point.
Andrea, sorry, I was just getting some information from Adrian. We're working on a couple of logistics things. So as we wait, Andrea, you stand by. Adrian's telling me we got a live picture. Go ahead and show me the live picture, Adrian. I think this is where the press conference should be happening. There we go. We've got a microphone set up. Not sure who's standing in front of me here.
You see that E45?
We have 15 minutes to get off.
Let's just, if we can, let's transfer the audio. Okay, here we go. So inside the courtroom, they're not ready just yet. And we don't know if we're going to hear from both sides, but everybody has certainly been given the opportunity on this day where Karmelo Anthony was found guilty of murder in the case, of course, in the death of Austin Metcalf, convicted of murder earlier this afternoon, and then they went directly into the sentencing phase. And it wasn't a long time after that that the jury arrived at the decision that Karmelo Anthony is to serve 35 years in prison. Let's turn the audio up and listen inside the courtroom. I'd like to get a gauge on where we're at. Feels like we don't have the audio. Yeah, Adrian, you work on that. Adrian's our producer, by the way. You're watching live continuing coverage here on CBS News Texas on the stream tonight. Crossing our fingers that we're going to hear things in here. We're working on it at the very moment. Possibly members here of the Metcalf family. Metcalf family members and attorneys as we work on the audio, many of the family members in court over the last hour to 90 minutes sharing victim impact statements with the court and the jury and all those involved, basically getting to say what they have wanted to say for so long. Austin Metcalf murdered, 2025. Adrian, where do we stand? All right, still working on the audio. Live inside the Collin County Courthouse, where 19-year-old Karmelo Anthony, a little over an hour ago, was sentenced to 35 years in state prison here in Texas. And you see sudden passion claim has been rejected. To explain one more time, the jury initially, with a murder conviction, would have been given the range, and it was a very wide range of punishment, 5 to 99 years. But then the claim of sudden passion was introduced as part of Texas law for them to consider if they felt that Karmelo Anthony was provoked and could have had some latitude, which would allow them to sentence anywhere from 2 to 20 years. But they rejected that, and they went with the 5 to 99, and they ended up obviously at 35 years. A little disheartened to tell you that we don't have the audio issue figured out here inside the courtroom, but we're listening to what I'm going to presume is one of the lead attorneys for the Metcalf family and the prosecution, obviously, who is sharing what they want to share, and then family members standing in support. Has been an extraordinary long year for everybody involved, especially for the Metcalf family, as you can well imagine. In a last-ditch effort during the sentencing phase earlier this evening, the only person called to the stand was Karmelo Anthony's mother. She's the only witness on the stand, and her quote, the takeaway quote from that was, "He is my oldest. He is my firstborn. He will always be my baby. I love him very much." And the defense attorney asked, does he regret what he did? And in what, in a courtroom view setting, you may look at as your last attempt for any grace from the jury or the court. Her answer was yes. He's very sorry for what he did. Those are the words of a mother who has now watched her son be sentenced to 35 years in prison for the murder of another young man. Another young man who was ripped from his family in an event that took place at that track meet of all places last year. All right, we've got audio. Let's listen in.
We remain committed to protecting our schools and standing with victims and their families. Thank you. Okay, that's it. All right. Take care, sir. Thank you, sir. Cool.
As always. You did great.
The attorney for the prosecution, and even though we got our audio fixed at the very end of it, the takeaway apparently was the presence of the Metcalf family during the entire trial was monumental for them, basically. That was the takeaway message. Their strength, their fortitude. 20 was on the table with the option, and they came back in relative short order there. So a jury that came into agreement on both ledgers in rather quick fashion and brought back the sentence of 35 years for Karmelo Anthony, who now, if we look at history, based on the transfer of someone who has been convicted, Karmelo Anthony, in relative short order, is going to be in the hands of the Texas Department of Criminal Justice and off to the state prison system. All right, we've got the attorney queued up, the prosecutor with the Metcalf family surrounding him. Let's now listen in full to what he had to say.
Good evening. I'm Greg Willis, Collin County District Attorney. Today, justice was served. A year ago, when this senseless murder unfolded, I said that it had struck a deep nerve in Collin County and far beyond. I asked our community to ignore all the noise and instead be level-headed and patient as the process worked. And today, the process delivered accountability. We are grateful to this jury, and we are grateful that the good citizens of Collin County had an opportunity to weigh in on this case. I'm proud of the exceptional work of Bill Werski and our team of prosecutors, DA investigators, and victim advocates, and all the good and outstanding men and women of the Collin County District Attorney's Office. We thank all the parents and their brave kids who did the right thing. Despite the trauma of witnessing the senseless murder at a school track meet, they cooperated fully and testified truthfully. Their courage was essential to securing justice in this case. I'm especially honored to be joined here today by Jeff and Megan Metcalf and their son Hunter. Their strength and grace through this has been their strength and grace throughout this unimaginable journey has been inspiring. They won't be taking questions at this time, but their presence here speaks volumes about their commitment to seeking justice for Austin. I want to thank Judge Rhodes for presiding over this trial with fairness and efficiency. I want to thank Frisco PD for their investigation. I want to thank the Collin County Sheriff's Office led by Sheriff Skinner for providing the security for the courthouse. I want to thank all law enforcement throughout the county for making this a safe trial for everyone. This verdict sends a clear message. Violence like this won't be tolerated in our Collin County community, and we remain committed to protecting our schools and standing with victims and their families. Thank you. Okay, that's it. All right.
The words of Greg Willis, District Attorney for Collin County. There you see Hunter Metcalf, the son. There's the mother and the father right there with the goatee walking through the shot. The Metcalf family will not be speaking tonight.
That's usually how it works.
And with that,
we're not going to take it.
We want to say thank you for joining us on the CBS News Texas stream tonight as attorneys have talked for the prosecution, DA of Collin County. We did not hear from Karmelo Anthony's family tonight or from their attorneys, but perhaps that may change before we see you for the news at 10 o'clock tonight. And with that, I'll say thanks for watching on this evening where Karmelo Anthony finds himself now sentenced to 35 years in state prison here in Texas for the murder of Austin Metcalf. On behalf of J.D. Miles, Andre Lucia, Marvin Hurst, our Aaron Jones inside the courtroom, and a lot of faces that you don't get to see behind the scenes, thanks for joining us here on CBSNewsTexas.com.